a leader always has, especially if they're also given the rank of a manager, they have skin in the game, right? A coach doesn't, especially if they are an external coach. So within my own organization, I have skin in the game. I mean, both financially, but also from other perspectives.
Yeah.
When I work with my clients, it's the CEO who has the skin in the game, not me.
Who is Sohrab Salimi?
Who is Sohrab Salimi? I mean, we know each other, Mian, but maybe for your audience, my name is Sohrab. I'm based out of Cologne in Germany. Originally, I come from Iran. My parents moved here when I was 4 years old, so I grew up here. Basically an immigrant kid, I think very similar background to what you have. Now, I ended up studying medicine, as many Iranians do. And at the end of med school, I decided maybe that's not something that I want to do for the next 40 years of my life. Although I was very passionate about both the topics that I studied and also the work of a medical doctor, but I had also some interest in other spaces. So I decided to join Bain & Company, a management consulting firm. I worked there for 3 years almost. Initially, a lot of work in the pharmaceutical and medtech space. Ultimately ended up, after I learned the tools and basically things that a management consultant needs to know about, which is Excel and PowerPoint, I was allowed to move on to, that's basically it, right? I was allowed to move on to other industries, which was very enlightening for me because I worked in IT, I worked in telecommunications, I worked in automotive. I did a stint in the private equity practice, which is all about due diligence of different companies at a very fast pace. So you dive into completely new industries on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And then at almost 3 years, I decided to leave the company because the learning curve was getting flatter. It was still not flat. There was one. It was becoming more and more consulting specific. And I knew from the beginning, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And honestly, my wife told me, as long as you're working here, we're not going to have any kids because you're almost never at home. So I left that company. I founded a startup with a friend of mine from high school. And in addition to that, I supported my parents' IT consulting company as someone who helps them take this into the next generation, basically. And very quickly, I realized that many of the things that I had read about in Lean Startup from Eric Ries, that was around 2010, are applicable also to bigger corporations. And that many of the challenges that my parents' clients were facing in building big software products could be handled with agile engineering practices. And that was so interesting to me that I decided to dedicate more and more and more of my time to that. And ultimately, clients started asking for workshops. Within my parents' company, we set up the first teams that were also building products as Scrum teams. I was acting as Scrum Master and product owner at the same time, which I realized is not the best combination to have if you want to be successful, but it's great if you want to learn how to not do things. And at some point, I realized that I have so much passion for teaching stuff that I want to do this with a higher capacity of my time. So I thought about how can I get good at teaching? And I said the first step is I attend a class. So I attended Gary Benefield's product owner class in London. I loved the course. I loved Gabby. She was so amazing. And I asked Gabby in that course, would you mentor me to become a certified Scrum trainer? She was like, oh, I've never heard that within like the first course that someone attends. And long story short, Gabby mentored me. She connected me with a few other CSTs, among them Reza Farhang, Andreas Schliep, and etc. And 2 years later, I passed the tech. So in 2015, I became a CST. And ever since then, I've been spending half of my time teaching courses, product ownership, Scrum Mastery, a lot of Agile leadership, especially in the past 3-4 years. Met a lot of cool people. But the other 50% of my time, I try to spend as much as possible of that in helping organizations to take everything that we learn in our classes with a lot of practical examples, but still in theory, to apply those things actually into practice. And as part of that, worked on some really, really cool products. Among that, a truck with MAN, helped a bit Roche develop the Corona or the COVID PCR test much quicker than in the past, and insulin pens, and yes, also a ton of software. So that's me.
That's awesome. And I know, like, I've seen you post, pictures of your wife, and I didn't know about your parents having the company, and that must have helped. I've had several people on the podcast where they've talked about, or at least it was interesting to me that always seemed to help to have that guide, like either if it's your parent or either if it's, and then our significant others are have a huge impact kind of on helping us figure things out. So could you maybe talk about in what ways did your parents and your wife shape it a little bit more? You mentioned it a little bit, but like, do you have any specific examples, and how helpful, how much credit do you give them for that? Because I think it's I've had mentors. When we came to the United States, my dad was working, back home on electric power plant. And like when we came here, they were working pretty low jobs, and like they sometimes work two jobs. So like I felt like a lot of times I had the mentors, but my parents were busy working. But others that helped me played a huge role in my kind of development, my understanding of things. So I don't know if that's the case for you. But I'm interested to hear.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if my parents hadn't brought me to this country, I would probably not be where I am. So that's number one. But besides everything that they taught me when I was growing up, right? Like hard work pays off, and like having a healthy family, and always supporting me with any idea that I had. Later, when I was working within their company, that company was an excellent sandbox for me to try a lot of things. And they spent a lot of time and resources on allowing me to run those experiments. Some of those experiments went well, some of those experiments didn't. And I assume that if I had been working in a larger corporation where people not necessarily had taken so much interest into my development as my parents did, I wouldn't have developed that quickly. So the pace at which I learned was based on the environment that I was in, and that environment was primarily shaped and created by my parents. So a lot of credit goes to them, definitely, and even up until now. So right now, every day I spend 15 to 20 minutes talking to my dad, and every challenge that I have, or even just small questions, I can always ask him, and he gives me like 2-3 sentences, and they immediately help me go forward. They encourage me and help me solve those problems without him telling me what to do, right? But just his wisdom of being more longer on this planet and having lived in different countries and systems, etc. My wife, I mean, a lot of the things that I managed to do in the past years while also becoming a father were only possible because at the beginning, like the first 3, 4, 5, 6 years of us being parents, she primarily took care of the kids while she was also working, but she worked part-time. And Corona in that case was actually quite good for us because it stopped me from traveling. In the moment I stopped traveling, I could spend significantly more time with the kids, take more of those responsibilities, in addition to like being the fun dad on the weekends. But and that enabled her to get her own practice at the beginning of this year, right? She's a dentist, so now she runs her own dental practice because I now can drive the kids to school every morning and pick them up on most days. So she has a bit more freedom to follow her passion and do her thing and build up her career. And so a lot of credit goes to her as well, obviously.
Yeah. And what about, I think I've seen you in like, do you have a coach? Like, what's the importance, I guess what I'm getting at is having those, they can be family members, they can be, coaches around you, but like, what do you think? Do you have coaches? Have you had coaches, and why?
Yeah, so I've had mentors outside of family. I mentioned earlier, Gabby Benefield, Reza, Pete Behrens. A lot of them have mentored me and helped me to get here. But in 2019, I think, I decided for my own development as growing, becoming a CEO of a company that is also growing, and also for the work that I do with senior executives, that I would follow the advice that I give to them. And that advice is you need to get a coach, right? So I looked around, I asked even on Twitter, and one of my mentors, actually, Alex Osterwalder from Strategizer, he reached out. He was like, Sohrab, I have an excellent coach. I'm like, who? Yourself? He's like, no, no, no. The same person who coaches me. I'm like, cool. Yeah, introduce us. It turns out her name is Shani. She's based out of Vienna. And Shani and I have now been working together for 3 years on a bi-weekly basis. Every other week, we have a 1-hour call.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's based on a challenge that I'm facing in that moment. And if I don't have any current challenge, we just work on a backlog of things that she and I have come up together, things that I want to improve, where I want to get better at. And I think, or I'm certain that the work that I've done with her in the past 3 years has helped me navigate definitely better through the challenges of COVID, building or increasing the number, the size of my organization, being more effective with my clients. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone. And ever since I started working with her, I also recommended some of my clients to work with her, or can more actively promote having a coach, not only being a coach myself.
Yeah, I think in professional setting it's so like, a lot of times people find it weird when I talk to agile coaches or consultants. Like, we all, like you said, we all talk about having a coach, but not many of us have. And I know from my personal experience, it's helped always, even having a mentor or having a coach, somebody there to help you, kind of almost like, help you stay focused and help you better understand who you are and what you want. And or what you want is really helpful. Okay, I want to.
One thing maybe to add here, which I found also very important, is you not only need to have a coach, you also need to have a coach that holds you accountable. So the very first session that I had with Shani, she was like, if I don't see you taking this seriously, I'm going to fire you as a client. I'm like, okay. So it holds you accountable, like having a good personal trainer that if you show up to training, he's not going to have coffee with you. You're there to train. And yes, there are days where you're not as strong and they just change like the types of exercises that you do. But in general, they want you to make progress and they're invested in you making progress, not only making you feel well. So if you're looking for a coach, I would definitely advise to have someone that holds you accountable.
Great. So World Cup, Germany, Hansi.
You saw my post.
Is Hansi Flick a good coach? And let's talk about that and leadership.
Let's say, I mean, I picked up something.
So maybe for people that are not familiar with what I just mentioned, World Cup in Qatar, Germany just got kicked out. And maybe you can give some context around Hansi Flick, the German national coach, and some of the things that he said. And I want to get your thoughts, which you mentioned in the post a little bit, about leadership. And I want to talk a little bit about leadership and from your perspective, what he said and why that might not be best example of leadership.
Yeah. So I mean, I think everyone has different definitions, right? And to be fair to him, I've never met him. I haven't worked with him. And I wrote that post based on one observation of him giving an interview yesterday. Now, what was the context? The reporter asked him, like, to what extent he's angry. And the first thing he said is, I'm angry about my team. I'm angry off my team, basically. Yeah. And did not reflect on his own mistakes at all. And my question would always be, especially looking at the context of football, who selects the players, who decides who's going to play, and who decides who plays on which position? The answer to all three of these questions is the coach. So if you are angry at how your team played, first and foremost, you need to be angry with yourself. And based on that one observation, right? Based on that one observation, I wouldn't want to work with someone that first, like, if we are in the locker room and the coach is mad at the players, be mad at the players. There was also this video from the Saudi coach in the middle of the game against Argentina, right? How he was like going at the players in English, and then there was someone translating it. And that fired up the players, and they ultimately won the game against Argentina. But outside of the locker room, in front of the press, I think that's not something that a great leader would do, right? Talking bad about his team that he has selected. So that was the one thing that triggered me to include him in this post. But yeah, let's dive into leadership.
It's very true. Like, in a sense, like everybody has good intentions, and like to throw the team under the bus like that, with is maybe not a best definition of leadership. Or so, what is leader really responsible for, from your perspective?
I think, a leader, you can look at it from multiple perspectives. Ultimately, it's the leader's job to make the organization work. Right? And by make the organization work, I mean help the organization achieve whatever results they aim to achieve. So if I look at my own context, my job is to create value for our clients. Right? I'm still doing that. I'm not just managing my company, but it's also to provide an environment within which the members of my team can do great work. What does that environment consist of? It first of all consists of an environment where everyone feels respected and appreciated and feels included as members of a team. It also includes, from my perspective, knowing why do we do what we do as an organization, and how do I contribute to that individually, right? And the third thing is having a shared understanding of how we're going to work with each other. Now, do I have to define all of that? I think the how part, not necessarily. This is where in Scrum, the working agreements come into play, and those are usually things that we create collaboratively. Every single thing that we do I have to define that? Not necessarily. But I think it is my fundamental job, both as CEO, maybe even more as founder of the organization, to define what are we going to work on? What is it that we as an organization are going to tackle as a problem? Because even if we had unlimited amounts of money, I think it wouldn't be right to not focus, right? I look at some of the most successful companies, the ones that I admire for the products that they build, and the one that usually comes to my mind is Apple, right? Yeah. Apple is also the most valuable company in the world, maybe with the exception of Saudi Aramco, which they just have oil and gas, right? They're not innovating at all. Yeah. But Apple, for the size that they have, is a maniacally focused company. The portfolio of products that they have is very small, given their size, both in terms of products and services. And how did they become like this? It's because the leaders at Apple, and it started out with Steve Jobs, provide that focus. Like, what are we going to work on, and what are we not going to work on, right? What are the things that we're not going to spend time, energy, resources, whatever on, but so that we can create the best of the products and services that we are focusing on. Exactly. They still don't get everything right, which is clear, right? None of us gets it. But I think this is one of the fundamental things that a leader should do: focus the organization and at the same time provide the environment to succeed.
Yeah. What are some of the other companies maybe that you work with? Maybe the are examples of good companies and good leadership maybe that you can mention.
There will be some unpopular ones in here. No, because again, you asked me, like, what is my definition? And my definition is a leader making an organization successful.
Yeah.
Now, does it mean that you should make your organization successful no matter what? No. I think still you need to follow the law, and act in a humane way, and all of that I think is important. But we talk so often about like this is the right way of leading and this is the wrong way of leading without looking at the results. And results do matter, because if we don't deliver results, and I think that's one of the problems in the Agile community, right? We don't look at those results enough. And so looking at organizations, Tesla is an amazing company, not only because they have become the most valuable automotive company from being not existent
in such a short period of time. I mean, like that's unheard of.
Exactly, that's unheard of. But their product is great. I've been driving a Tesla now for 7 years, right? It's an amazing product. It's still like ages from everything else that's coming. I test drive every new electric car that comes out from the major German automotive companies. They're nowhere close to where Tesla is, right? I can say this from a customer perspective. But they've also managed to shift the whole industry.
Yeah.
And I think we don't give them, and specifically Elon Musk, enough credit for that. I was running workshops for some of the major automotive companies. I won't name them here.
Yeah.
In the 5, 6, 7 years ago. And whenever I went to their office with my Tesla, they were always laughing at me. Like, why do you have this shitty car, right? The door doesn't close properly. And like in German, we call this Spaltmaße, right? So that every single like inch is perfect. And the German car companies, they do this amazingly well. Tesla initially did not. But I told them, I was like, I wanted to have an electric car that fits my whole family. And none of you companies have built that. So that's why I bought a Tesla. Now look at who's laughing now, right? And they are all, back then they said electric cars, they have no future. There's no way electric vehicles are going to be the future. Now, all of them
this
say,
fast too. Like, it's...
And this is single-handedly been done by Tesla. It's not the regulators, because the regulators wouldn't bring in any regulation if they didn't see that it was scientifically and from a business model perspective possible to do this. Exactly. And Tesla has showed that. And everyone who says, yeah, but Tesla's not profitable, go check. Tesla is the most profitable automotive company on the planet. And their profitability is only going to increase. So looking at the results, I think Tesla is a great example. Amazon is a great example. But to move outside of tech, you can see behind me some of the books. There is one called Humanocracy from Gary Hamel and Michele Zanini. I was fortunate enough to speak to Michele several times. And I love that book because they have covered so many amazing companies that have also made a transformation to become what they are today. And the most interesting one probably is Haier, a Chinese company which produces like refrigerators and washing machines and all of that, and how they have structured their organization and how they have changed over decades, not within 1 or 2 years. That's just phenomenal. And I think the way that they approached it and the way that they're continuously changing themselves to be a more successful organization for their customers, but also for their employees and for their shareholders, I think I respect them a lot for that. So
yeah, I mean, like, I just maybe to come back a little bit to Tesla, like I just saw this morning, like that they're rolling out the trucks and like the possibility of autonomous cars and self-driving cars and self-driving trucks. I mean, that's talking about real disruption to the global economy, and that's not now science fiction. Like that's going to happen next 10-20 years. It's just I've been just impressed with that. Another thing, maybe to come back to Tesla, and like you mentioned it a couple of times, just like how important is it, like Elon is like so into like he's sleeping, or like he's known to be involved as a leader, as a manager, in understanding what developers or what developers in the context of Scrum, like people that are doing the work, are doing. I know you have an opinion on that, but why is it so important on leaders and managers to not be clueless about what people that are doing the work
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like,
I know what you're saying. So I think we're all, I mean, the way we think about stuff and what we believe to be true is usually based on the experiences that we had, right? And initially, I mentioned that I studied medicine. So whenever I face a challenge or wherever I have a question, I go back to my education as a medical doctor and the way that this education is set up. Now, why do I bring this up? Because when I think of management or leadership, right, and there is a difference, but I think every manager should have leadership capabilities. But that's maybe another question that comes up a bit later. Now, in the world of medicine, everyone that is in a leading position, and if you look at the most successful hospitals, even they're like the ones that are in charge of the hospital running profitably have medical backgrounds, right? They know how it is to be in the field. They know how it is to work with the customer. How many managers or CEOs do we hear that say, oh, the customer is the most important thing? Now, when you ask them, when was the last time you spoke to your customer? They're like, I don't know, right? Yeah. But the best companies, and I saw posts from IKEA, I saw posts from Amazon, I read, everyone in managerial positions is asked to spend time on the shop floor or in the customer center or customer support, etc., because you need to be close to your customers, to not be clueless, to not just be a manager, an administrator of people. And in medicine, even up until the very end, unless they move into like hospital management, but the chief of any department is still working with patients.
And why is that? Is it like, from my perspective, it's the context, right? The more experience and the more you're in the weeds, the better you understand the context, and you have to contextualize almost everything in those type of environments, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, think about it. We talked about Apple earlier. Do you think Apple would have come up with the idea of an iPhone, etc., if Steve Jobs was not that deep into the technology industry? I mean, he was one of the fathers of the first personal computers, the Apple II, later the Macintosh. So he has this deep sense of technology, where the industry is coming from and where this industry is heading, what is possible and what would probably resonate with customers. Apple had that experiment with a leader who had no clue, who was probably a good manager because he was successful at Pepsi, but he had no clue on where to move this organization. And based on all of these experiences, my own experience, but also observing many of the best companies, I believe in order to be a really great leader, you need to have deep understanding of what your organization's core value proposition is. So I wouldn't be able to run my company if I had not that experience working with clients, teaching the courses, right? Building the curricula. That is at the core of our company. I don't need to know software development that deeply because like my team building the learning management system, that's another thing. But the value proposition of our company is the knowledge that we develop and then package to deliver it to our clients. Everything else is secondary to that. And for that core, I think you need to have expertise in that field.
Exactly. Maybe to come back to leader versus, I want to maybe talk about in kind of three, manager, leader, coach. What's the difference between leader and manager from your perspective, like from accountability standpoint, like, and then also, I've heard you say that leader cannot be coach or something like that, so could you maybe just elaborate on the differences or slight differences in from your perspective? What does it mean for you to be a manager, leader, coach, and what's the overlap as well?
Yeah, so manager is first and foremost a rank that you're given, right? You become a manager of these people. Doesn't mean that you're a leader, right? Leadership is taking initiative. and taking initiative in a way that others follow you. Because if no one follows you, you're not a leader. So that for me means that you can be a leader without having given that rank. So anyone in an organization can take initiative and can create followership, so become a leader. But I believe everyone in a managerial position, especially if you go higher up in the organization, in addition to being a manager, a rank that they have been given, they need to be a leader.
Exactly.
So when I work with clients, I always say everyone can be a leader. Managers must be leaders. To also emphasize on this.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because like you could be given authority, and there are a lot of people that don't want to lead. And what you're saying is that if you're given that authority, you're accepting the leadership responsibility as well.
Exactly. So it's very similar to parenting. I mean, almost every human being can make a child, right? There are some people who, based on like whatever, they cannot get pregnant or they cannot make kids, right? But in general, every human being can make a child. Is everyone going to be a good parent and accept that responsibility? Not necessarily. So if you want to be a parent, you first have to think about, am I willing to take that responsibility for a long period of time? It's not like, oh, every now and then I'm going to take that responsibility. No, you need to be committed. Like the pig in the story of the pig and the chicken, right? The Agile story, right? One is committed, the other is involved. So, and then going to your question about the coach, I think coaching and having coaching skills is incredibly important. I think every leader should have coaching skills, among them helping people through guiding questions, right? Not telling them what to do, but help them understand or identify what needs to be done themselves. Having a passion for developing people, right? Helping them acquire new skills. But there is a fundamental difference between a leader within an organization and a coach. And that is, a leader always has, especially if they're also given the rank of a manager, they have skin in the game, right? A coach doesn't, especially if they are an external coach. So within my own organization, I have skin in the game. I mean, both financially, but also from other perspectives. When I work with my clients, it's the CEO who has the skin in the game, not me. I can come up with all of these fancy ideas, except you should be doing that. And they ultimately have to live with the consequences. The worst thing for me is they're like, Sohrab, we can't afford working with you anymore, right? But they have probably lost their jobs or had to fire a lot of people, which is much more severe consequences than what I would suffer as the coach. So I don't say this to minimize the value of coaching, but to emphasize the importance of distinguishing between the position where a leader is in and where a coach is in. Still, having those coaching skills is very important for every manager, for every leader.
Yeah, same way that, like, you know, to those coaching, you would have facilitation skills, you would have, like, you know, those are the things that you're adding. But I really like how you described that difference between manager, leader, and how adding coaching competency is just that. It's a competency. Doesn't mean that, that's similar kind of idea here. And there's also been, for as long as I know, the people confused about product managers and product owners. Could you maybe do something similar that you just did with this one? Like from your perspective, what is the difference, and why do you think so many people are confusing and misunderstanding these two?
Yeah, for me, they're fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
If a product owner in Scrum is given the authority that they should be given, right, based on the definition of Scrum, and not every product manager in traditional organizations actually has that authority. So I personally like the term product owner more because it emphasizes that ownership piece. But unfortunately, what I see happening as many organizations, and I don't want to finger point too much, but especially organizations that apply the Scaled Agile framework,
Yeah.
a completely wrong perspective of what product ownership is, because each team level product owner in SAFe is not really a product owner unless the product manager in SAFe at the top understands how to decentralize decision making to each of those product owners, which then becomes more similar to what we have in Less Huge with a product owner and area product owners. But that unfortunately is not the same thing. So
maybe to dwell on that a little bit, that has to in SAFe, and what you're saying really has to do with the organizational governance and design. Ultimately comes down to authority, right? Like if you can give, I can say, Sohrab, you're a product owner and I can give you that label, but if I don't give you that authority, then and I think, I don't know who said it, you probably know better, but like, maybe it's Daniel Mezick, at least I can think of him saying that the hardest thing in Scrum is the decision rights, giving up,
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Decision-making authority is probably the hardest thing in Agile in general. Right, because when I look, so in one of the things that I teach in my Agile leadership course is also looking a bit at the history of management. Contrary to what many people would assume, management is not that old in terms of being formalized as a profession. It probably starts in 1905, 1906 with Frederick Winslow Taylor writing down scientific management. Now, we might laugh at that, but at that time, it was pretty revolutionary. And it allowed a company like Ford to build the assembly line and drive down the time that it took to create a Model T from 13 hours to 90 minutes, if I have the numbers right. Drive down the cost from $850 to $300. So almost a third of that. And that was a big revolution. So, but that was 100 years ago or 120 years maybe. And over time, we see bigger changes happening to management. And the pattern that I always see moving from the Tayloristic model to what we then later saw at Toyota with lean and lean management, this is giving authority or decentralizing decision-making authority. With regards to lean, it's more about how to build things, right? How to increase quality. Not so much about what kind of product we build. But the moment we move to Agile, it really requires a decentralization of both what and how decisions, at least to a large extent. Because those small teams, right, cross-functional, self-managed, whatever, that are close to the customer, they probably know best what to build and how to build it. And if we don't give them that decision-making authority, we're taking everything from them, right? We're telling them work close to the customer, but if they cannot make those decisions, what are they going to build? Are they constantly going to run up back to the CEO and ask them, can I build this? And can I do that? And by the way, here's a business plan for this. Can you get me budget approved? The whole concept of delivering value fast to our customers is built around decentralizing decision-making authority. Now, the question that comes up, and give me one more minute on that, is how do we ensure that they not only get the authority, but also have the capability of making those decisions? Because we not only want fast decisions, we also want good decisions, right? And that piece, making sure that people have those capabilities, that's another thing that I believe leaders are fundamentally responsible for.
Well, that's and I just want to come back to what you also posted the tweet from Elon, and I think that's a good example to build into this, where he said, like, we're gonna make a lot of mistakes over the next couple of months, but we're gonna figure it out. And having leaders say that, and that's exactly what you're saying in a sense, like having that shorter feedback or validation process is so essential to agility. Like, if you look at it from that perspective. So could you maybe, is that what you're saying in a sense that
that's one piece of the capabilities that we need to build, right? The right processes, and also building the awareness, and through that awareness, the courage to constantly ask for feedback. Because unless you're a kid, right, we as human beings are not really good at constantly asking for feedback. We actually see people asking for feedback when they know they got it right, because they want a tap on the shoulder. But the moment, or as long as people are afraid of having done something wrong, they usually don't actively ask for feedback. And kids do that, from my observation. They constantly ask for feedback because they don't know yet what right or wrong is, right? So they just ask for feedback. They want to learn. And once they get punished for getting things wrong, they stop asking for feedback. So this is one aspect of
so that's that psychological safety. Like once you break that psychological safety, then
now psychological safety, there's also a lot of misconceptions around that, but there's a whole great post by Tim Clark, which you can probably share with your audience. I would also call it, because psychological safety sometimes sounds like it only becomes the leader's job to create that environment, right? Where people feel safe. When I look at, and this is now the part, me as an immigrant speaking, right? The reason why my parents live in Germany is because they were politically active in Iran. The same thing that the brave ladies are doing right now, my parents were doing 40 years ago. My father's life was threatened, so they left the country. Now, did he feel psychologically safe to take initiative? Not at all. And millions of other people in South Africa, in Latin American countries, right, all over the world, right? You are from Bosnia, right?
Yeah.
These people take initiative.
Courage, right?
Yeah, despite a lack of psychological safety. So we need to have that courage. Now, the moment we try as leaders to provide an environment where people feel more psychologically safe, it's a great thing, because more courage emerges. But we still also, what I would look at every one of my employees, but also other people, is how much courage do you actually have? Are you willing to stand up for the things that you believe are wrong? Either the product that we're building, how we're building it, how we collaborate with each other, what we stand for as an organization. Speak up. Because if you don't assume anyone will hear you. Right? So none of us as human beings are mind readers. So we need to have that courage.
Yeah, but it's also this. I mean, I've been like reading and trying to, preparing for this discussion, and like one of the other things that's coming back to me based on what I saw is like, the values. Like, a lot of times we're talking about these values, but not actually enacting those values. Like, hey, we all the way from companies putting these are our values you mentioned earlier. Like, we're customer focused. And we care about our customers, but your actions and behaviors don't represent that. So same thing here. Like if it's like if your values, beliefs are really that important to you, you'll have the courage to stand up for those values and beliefs. And that's one key thing I think in organizations, in life in general, like you said, to have the courage to stand up for what you believe.
Yeah. My wife and I, like every evening, we take a walk, unless it's raining, and sometimes it's raining too much in Germany. But what we always discuss is, hey, values are what we value.
Yeah.
Right. That's where the term comes from. Values are what we value. And we spoke about this several years ago. We're like, what is the most important thing to us? Our kids. Almost every parent would say that. And then we took it to the next question. So how do we show it that our kids are the most important thing to us? Yeah, we try to provide them with a good education, a safe home, like good food, all of that. Do they need these things for their future? Yes, they do. What do they also need? They also need a planet that is still habitable, right? So now if we go back and say, we value our kids above everything, and a lot of parents say this, I'm going to do everything that it takes for my kids. And then I ask myself, I'm like, am I doing everything that it takes for my kids, right? Am I cutting down on my own carbon emissions the way I could? So I was already driving an electric car, and now we can debate about that, whether that reduces emissions or not. But I'm like, yeah, one thing that I definitely don't do is I still eat a lot of meat. And being from the Middle East, I used to have like 21 portions of meat a week. Like breakfast, meat, lunch, meat, dinner, meat. All the time I was having meat. I'm like, man, if you really value your kids, and that was my conclusion, right? I don't look bad at other people if they come up with other decisions, right? I was like, if I really say I value my kids above everything, I have to change that. Cut it down to 3 portions of meat a week. Then I realized maybe I can go even completely vegetarian. And I would have never thought that I can, but the big meat eater that I was still managed to do this. Why? Because I value this and I prioritize this above a lot of other things. Now, in organizations, if we say we're customer focused, what are you doing that results in customer focus? Do you speak to your customers frequently? Are you willing to compromise your own benefit for the benefit of the customer? And I'll give you an example. Every time I mean, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes Amazon gets a delivery wrong, right? I order a lot from Amazon. Sometimes they get it wrong. In one case, I had ordered protein bars, 15 protein bars in one box. It was shipped to our place, right time. There were 14 bars in that box. One was missing. My guess, the postal guy, right, took one out of it. Maybe he was hungry. I just thought I call customer hotline. I just informed them about this. What does the guy do? He's like, oh, we're so sorry. I will refund you the money. I'm like, for one bar? No. For the whole box. I'm like, but I have 14 bars. He's like, no, full refund. That's customer obsession. So they live this, what they mention as their number one leadership principle. They live it from CEO to the guy doing customer service. And that's the difference between having values on the wall and having values that you live.
Exactly. That align with your behaviors. There's a lot of disconnect between what you say and what you do. So we have a couple more minutes. I have a hard stop. I have a class that starts in 10 minutes, and the Zoom thing needs to render, as you probably know. So maybe one more question, and then I would also like to see, what would you like to leave us with, a message but my last question is, why do you think most agile transformations, or what we call transformations, fail? What are some of the key, if you had to pick 3 things why they fail from your perspective? We all have our own ideas, but what are yours?
I think number one is not a shared understanding about what agility means within that organization. It doesn't even have to be across organizations, but within that organization is number one. Number two, I think, is not the right person being in charge. Right? I was talking to a customer. There was someone in charge of their transformation team. I asked him whether he had heard about the man called John Kotter. He said, no. Honestly, if you haven't heard about John Kotter, if you haven't read his books, and also from other people, you shouldn't be leading an agile transformation. So that's number two. And number three, I think, is patience. Everyone wants to get results this fast. Every case study that I look at, and I mentioned Hire earlier, it took them decades, not years, decades to become who they are today. It's going to take Allianz or Audi or whatever company you want to name them. It's going to take them decades to become more agile and to be able to compete with Amazon, Apple, or whoever. Now, they can speed this up to some extent, but there is this saying, it's still going to take 9 months to get a kid, even if you have 9 ladies, right? So, and I think it's because it takes time to build these capabilities. Right.
Well, it's like a fitness. I think a lot of people have described it as a fitness. Like, and also when you achieve that fitness, you gotta work as hard to maintain that fitness. It's not like you're done. You know, when you say, "Oh, our company is now very, responsive," whatever your definition, like you said, going back, fitness is a subjective term in a sense that I can consider myself fit for the pickup soccer games that I play with, but not fit for World Cup. So
we should play one of those pickup soccer games at one of the gatherings in the future.
I would love to. I just had a ACL surgery in April, so like I'm almost ready to start playing again. So maybe in Portland or Amsterdam. I'm definitely planning to go there if I can. So what would you like to leave us with, Sohrab? A message or something.
We talked about so many things. I mean, something that I leave everyone in my classes with. My favorite quote is from Muhammad Ali, and he says, "Service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth." And my assumption is most people that are going to listen to your podcast are part of the very few fortunate people that live in like a free society and have a certain level of income, etc. So the room that we occupy on Earth is usually quite bigger than the room that other people occupy on Earth. And based on that, I think our service should also be bigger. So whatever you can do, just help a few others to lead a better life. And sometimes that's through sharing your experiences, your knowledge. We talked about the importance of mentors and coaches with them and help them become better versions of themselves and create the next generation of leaders and coaches.